Let's go over front support, side support, and reverse support. The most important thing for front support is that you don't let your back arch. The whole idea is that you have a nice rounded upper back with a straight lower back, feet together, legs straight, and hands about shoulder width apart. Most coaches will have their athletes hold this for about a minute on each side, front support, side support, and reverse support, and they usually do a couple times through, and this is pretty standard conditioning for a gymnast. If the athlete wants to start arching like this, just instruct them to push up their back and really push through the floor. You want a nice rounded back. You don't want any arching, you don't want any sloppiness. A lot of athletes will get tired, so they'll push their butt back. This just changes the muscles that they're recruiting, so just be aware that they're going to do that. But again, force them to come back into regular support. That's the muscles you're trying to really focus on. A lot of them will move their hands like that because their wrists get tired. So one thing some people do is put the hands on the edge of a beam so their wrists are more neutral, or they use little parallettes or other blocks, trying to make sure that the wrists aren't being overused. Doing different body control movements like this really help the athlete realize that they need to be steady. There's absolutely no movement. All you're doing is isolating one limb at a time, one movement at a time, and everything else stays completely straight. It's important that the athletes realize that the whole point of doing this is because it goes to other skills, such as push-ups, Maltese, planche, and a million other skills. The athletes need to realize that the whole point of keeping the back hollow is to match the curvature of the spine. Naturally, the spine already has a few curves in it, so if you can solidify the muscles around the spine in its natural configuration, you're doing a lot more for your spine in terms of injury prevention. Side support's pretty simple, nothing too technical here, but you do want the arms up in more of a T sort of configuration. You want the body to be straight, and you can also put the feet out in this way. This helps the athlete balance. The big thing to watch out for here is having your butt stick out and have the athlete rounded this way. You don't want the athlete leaning forward with an angle. You want them nice and straight, hips popping forward, and arms straight up. Again, it's important that the athlete's completely straight. You want the head neutral looking at the wall, the butt not sticking out that way. You want everything lined up in one linear fashion. A lot of coaches who use front support, side support, and reverse support to really help with pommel work. Activating those muscles on the floor is the first step to getting a nice long circle where you're not piking around. Reverse support, again, not too complicated. You don't want the hands facing backwards. You want the thumbs facing forward, at least at a 45-degree angle like here. You want the hips to be up and the feet together. The head can be in or it can be neutral, looking up more at the ceiling, but never have the head looking backwards. A lot of athletes will kind of slouch like this. You don't want that. So you just give them a friendly little nudge in their lower back and just kind of remind them to kind of keep those hips up. You can always add variations to these skills like flutter kicks and moving around, and you can even do wheelbarrow races like this. But that's for another video. Right now we just want to focus on just the technical aspect and how you guys can apply it to your training. It's important to note that you have to make sure you do both sides evenly. Bodies are never 100% balanced, but if you train one side more than the other, you will have noticeable differences in just the way you walk, run, or do other gymnastics elements. By adding in drills like this where you're actually going to bounce, you can see how the lower back wants to arch. I have to resist that and make sure that I stay extra tight when I'm doing these drills. A lot of coaches have their own variations of these drills, so just be creative, think of what you can do, and try to keep it different. The whole point of this drill is to really activate the core, but not in a movement sort of fashion. What you want is a solid, tight body form, so when the coach is throwing you for different skills or you have to be in a certain position when you're doing some other element, your body's already knowing how to be static and tight, ready for anything. To develop a really strong core, you're going to have to do a lot more conditioning than just these drills, but this is a great way to get started and a great thing for young athletes to do. If you want to make it tougher, have a coach gently press on the ribs as you're in the side support. Don't dig your fingers, but just naturally push a little bit to try to really aggravate those muscles to make them work a little bit harder. We actually did this exact drill with Nitro Circus in Australia, and what we had them do is line up in a row, and I had to try to walk on their back while they were in this position. If they were loose, then they would crumble. If they were tight, then I could easily walk on them. Of course, you wouldn't do that with new athletes, but there's times where I'll push on them and try to stack blocks on them as well and try to see how much weight they can take. It's a great way to get them building up and get a nice strong core for anything they're going to do in the future. Coaches, please be careful where you're placing your hands. Again, we're not talking about spotting right now, but in that series we'll be discussing a little bit more about proper hand placement and how to make sure that you're not crossing any boundaries. I'll have my athletes partner up and do this exercise. When they work together, they tend to be a little bit more efficient if you give them very specific exercises. I would be hesitant to do it with athletes that are a little young or new to the sport. They don't know exactly how much they can push, so you don't really want to have them pushing each other if they don't know what they're doing. So make sure you walk through it with your athletes, make sure they know exactly how much tension they should be putting on, and make sure that they're paying attention and are actually thinking about this logically. If you haven't already, please check out our conditioning playlist. I don't narrate all the videos, but it gives you a good example of some of the different conditioning exercises you can do with your kids. Thanks guys, have a great day.